this video, some of you have seen this video. It's not an uncommon thing, but this video is about Joe Rogan having a real serious talk with one of his best friends, Brendan. Many people say it's like an intervention. But the title of the video is The Ugly Truth. The thumbnail says The Ugly Truth. And I think in today's age, you need friends who are going to be really honest with you. And not just anyone can really be this honest. Obviously, Joe's a professional in his area of MMA fighting. So it carries a little more weight when he's telling his best friend that he's not good enough to beat the best guys. It's a hard conversation to have, but I think when you have trust with someone, real true trust in a friendship, that you're open to hearing hard things like that. I mean, think about it. This is what this man does. He's a fighter and he has aspirations to be a champion. And his best friend is telling him that he's not good enough. Let's hear how Joe breaks this down, and we'll analyze it a little as we go.
I worry about your commitment to fighting, and I worry about where you stand. Not your commitment to training. Not your commitment to training, not your commitment to give it your all. I think you have one foot out the door. I think you're looking. You disagree? Mm-hmm. I think you're looking at where the future is going to take you, and that you can't do this forever. You know, and I think that's a very dangerous place to be in fighting. And I've seen it with a lot of guys. They early in their career, they're invulnerable. They're beasts. They're monsters. They're 100% focused. Fighting becomes their life. It becomes their everything. And then somewhere along the line, they start thinking, "How long can I do this? When's the out time? What's my exit strategy?"
You don't think that's what the educated fighters are thinking?
Yes, that is what the educated fighters are thinking. But that's a part of the issue with fighting. There's people in fighting that do really well in the beginning because they're dumb. And this is what I mean by that. Really intelligent guys have to process a lot of variables. You have to process more variables than a guy who doesn't think about the future. Those reckless, crazy guys that happen to be athletically gifted, they just can put all that shit aside and go out there and perform. And as long as they get the right opponents, and as long as they have the right results, that feeds that invulnerability, and they can do fine. You're a smart dude. And the problem with smart dudes is smart dudes think about variables. You have to think about the future. You also think about brain damage. You think about concussions. You think about how many you've already had, how many you got coming up, how much damage you're taking in training. When does damage start to show up in your life? Like when does it show up? And how much can you mitigate? And how far is it when you're too far? We all know fighters that are fucking gone. I mean, we all do. We've all either we know them from television or we know them from real life. But you know, every time you see Muhammad Ali or you see Joe Frazier or you see Terry Norris is one of the saddest ones out there, man.
They're also guys.
Name an old school fighter.
Also, UFC veterans.
Name an old school fighter you've seen. You're like, God, that guy's sharp.
Exactly.
Said no one ever.
None. Said no one ever. But you are, you're a sharp dude, and so I know that if you keep going, that's coming. There's no way around that. You know?
True.
And the reality of your skill set, where you at now, I don't see you beating the elite guys.
Now, I want you to notice, I don't know if Joe did this intentionally. I think he did because, he's very good. He's a master communicator, is that Joe opened up with a lot of truths. And if you ever have a conversation with someone you care about, you need to go into it gently, but also with truth. They talked about the boxing and the MMA game, a lot of brain damage. Eventually, people stick around too long. They're going to come out of it, not really sharp with some brain damage and inability to speak clearly, think clearly, and they're not really who they were. So he breaks it down. And now Joe drops the truth bomb, the ugly truth. And it takes a lot of love to a friend to do what Joe is about to do. Let's continue.
I don't see you beating Cain Velasquez. I don't see you beating Junior Dos Santos. I don't see you beating Fabricio Verdum. You came into fighting fairly late in life. You're a good athlete. You're a strong guy. You're a big guy. And you can do a lot of things because of that. And you're very dedicated, and you're very disciplined, and you get shit done. But There's a reality of fluidity of movement, of mechanical efficiency of movement that happens when you get a guy who's trained his whole life at a certain aspect of MMA, whether it's wrestling, whether it's kickboxing, whether it's jiu-jitsu. There's a fluidity to their movement that you don't really have. And it's not that you don't try hard. It's not that you're not dedicated. It's not that you're not disciplined. It's not that you're not intelligent. There's shit that other people can do that you can't do.
I don't know if I agree with
Don't you
on
consider yourself a fairly decent striker, right? You consider yourself a fairly decent striker?
Yeah.
Right? How good do you think, like your punches are in comparison to like an elite high-level kickboxer, like a Joe Schilling or, or a Melvin Manhoof or someone who has real fluidity and mechanical efficiency to the way they move and punch and kick?
I think that's one argument. I think the same argument is being able to throw a punch to a takedown. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah.
No,
I
but-
do that. Those two guys you mentioned, I do it better. Nowhere. I mean, they're not even close on the same
Well,
level.
Schilling is really, he's a kickboxer essentially. He's
Yeah, but they fight
becoming-
MMA.
He just fought recently for the first time in I think it was 5 or 6 years.
So obviously, Brandon's ego is kicking in here, and he's not accepting Joe's harsh truth. But as time has gone by, people would agree that yeah, I think Joe was right, and that it was okay for Brandon to really walk away from the game and get into other things. But right now, Brandon is not accepting it, and that's it. You're never going to have a critical conversation like this, and the person say, "You know what? You're right, Joe Rogan. I'm not a good fighter. I'm not good enough to beat the best." There's always going to be push. So when you're having these conversations, there's always a push and pull. They're going to deny it, and then you're going to have to come back and break down what they're saying and come back to the opinion that's from love to this person that you care about. Let's continue on.
But I mean, he fought Melvin, which is another guy who's not going to take you down ever. It's a stand-up fight. But there are guys, like Georges St-Pierre, who's efficient standing up and then also, good at making those transitions. You it's not like you don't have good qualities. But if you had a wrestling match with Cain Velasquez, how well do you think you'd do?
Straight up wrestling.
Yeah.
I think people would be surprised.
Really? You think so? Mm-hmm. I think you'd be surprised. I really do. I think he'd fuck you up. And I say that as a friend and a guy who loves you. I think he's just on another level. It's just different. It's a different kind of athlete.
You said that, Brennan. I mean, you've said that you probably end up on your back with Cain. I mean,
Yeah, and that's not the fight there either.
Right.
If it's a jiu-jitsu match, it's a different thing too.
Well, if it's just a straight jiu-jitsu match, yeah, it's very different. But in MMA, obviously, he can punch you in the face when he's got you on the ground. I just think there's a certain amount there's a bridge between you and the very best guys in the world. And I don't know if you can cross that bridge.
That is so hard to tell someone who's a fighter. I don't know if people who are watching this video are familiar with fighters. Fighters have to have an ego. They have to have, I'm the baddest man on the planet to really get into the ring and exchange blows that could lead to death in some occasions for some fighters. So they need to have this ego. So when Joe's telling him, I don't think you can cross that line to be the best, that's a really hard truth to absorb. And you'll see shortly, Brendan, again, the ego fighting it and the tension that is normal for these types of conversations.
That's the reality of life. Like what if you look at your fight with Andrei Arlovsky, if you look at your fight with Travis Brown, if you look at your performances in the octagon, not what you think you're capable of, not what you know you're capable of at your best, but if you have to judge it just by your performances inside the octagon, you can go all the way back to your fight with Roy Nelson. You can go to your fight with Nogueira. You can go to your fight with Ben Rothwell.
Crow Cop.
Well, you knocked out Crow Cop, but the reality of Crow Cop is I'm a huge Crow Cop fan. Crow Cop has taken way too much fucking damage.
For sure.
Way
Then what about the
too much
Gonzaga
damage.
fight?
Well, you beat Gonzaga. It was a good fight. Yeah, it was a good fight. Look, you've had good fights. The Chris Tucker fight was very impressive.
Nah.
Like, look, you're a very good fighter. That's not what the issue is. The issue is, can you become a champion? If you can't become a champion, are you comfortable with getting knocked out 3 or 4 more times over the next 5 or 6 years. You know, and that is
That's
a
the big
possibility. It's a possibility. It might not happen. You might be okay, but it also might happen. It might happen 2 fights in a row. It might happen, you know, I mean, if you have to have a rematch for look, if Travis Brown loses his next fight and you win your next fight and you have a rematch with Travis Brown by some strange unforeseen circumstance, it's a fucking tough fight for you again, you know, and it very well could happen the same way again. You know,
Or
he's
it could
more
happen
fluid.
the other way, for sure.
It could, but he's more fluid on his feet. He's more lethal. Like his ability to close the distance and land shots, he has an extra speed, an extra ability to connect that I don't see.
You know, one thing, it's really hard to hear from people, your close friends, that you're not good enough and that another person is better than you. These are hard truths that Brandon's taking right now. And again, as you can see, the resistance, but you know, Joe's coming from a place of care and love, and he's being very careful with his words, but he's also being really honest. I think a lot of people, if you don't have a friend like this in your life, then you need one, because we all have a blind spot. You know, I talk about that in my other videos about having a blind spot. Like, who's covering your blind spot? You know, this is what's happening right now. Joe is telling Brandon, your blind spot is that you're not good enough. You're not the best athlete to get to that next level, and he's explaining it to him. But again, he is resisting, and it's a really hard conversation, especially it's a podcast. And, you know, even back then when this happened, Joe was, you know, rather popular. That's hard too. Let's continue.
From you. This is hard for me to say because I love you as a friend. You know, it's hard for me to say, but this is just a reality to the efficiency of his movements, the way he lands shots, and the way you do it. Could you land a haymaker on him and take him out? Yeah, it's totally. Yes, you could do it. You're a big guy, man. You hit hard. You know, if you land the right shot at the right time. But if I was objective and I was standing outside looking at it from the outside and I had a bet, I would have to bet on him. This sucks for you. It's hard to hear.
That's
you know?
probably the worst show I've ever done.
It's hard to hear, but
I don't necessarily, and you know me, you're my boy. I don't agree with everything you're saying either.
okay.
The other thing is, too, you don't think, I mean, when I fought Arlovski, I fought 1 round in almost a year. Mm-hmm. So I'm just not, you know, it's about getting comfortable in there. At
That's
the same
true,
time.
but look at Dominic Cruz's return bout against Mitsugaki. He hadn't fought in 3 years. Came in like a fucking bat out of hell. Looked like a goddamn world beater. Came in
For
and
sure,
just
and that's great for
took
the
it to
guys
him
that
and smashed
whatever,
him.
135, and that's the exception as well.
Johnny Hendricks hadn't fought in 13 months when he fought Robbie Lawler this past weekend. It was a fucking incredible fight, you know, down to the wire. But I mean, some people thought that Hendricks won. Some people thought Lawler won.
I didn't
But what
see it.
you didn't see from him is you didn't see a guy who looked like he couldn't make the connections. A guy who didn't look fluid in there. The Arlovski fight looked like you couldn't pull the trigger. Look, you were telegraphing the right hand. It was like your attacks were real obvious. Like
Yeah.
it was real obvious what you were attempting to do, as opposed to a guy like, you know, I hate to use George again, but George St. Pierre is one of the best, in my opinion, ever at disguising what he's going to do. You don't know if he's going to kickbox with you, if he's going to try to take you down. You don't know if he's going to try to jab you or hit you with a lead right. I mean, he throws all kinds of and it's part of the beauty of what he does. He's incredibly unpredictable. And you were the opposite of that. You were being very predictable. And Arlovski was stiff as hell. He was so nervous, and you couldn't close the deal on him. You couldn't get in on him. You couldn't land shots. I thought you should have won that fight, but I thought it was a terrible fight, you know. And I think that Arlovski, especially in that fight, was as ripe as he's ever going to get. You know, he was more comfortable in the Bigfoot Silva fight, and you know, obviously this is Bigfoot Silva, who's now off testosterone. There's a lot of issues there. I mean, Arlovski tagged him and he was out. Who knows how much of a factor that plays. There's a lot of factors in there. But, you know, if I'm a guy who's a talent scout and I'm looking at potential world beaters and I'm looking at guys who can fight at the elite level or guys who can fight for a world title, based on those performances, I would not say that you're there. I don't.
This is the third time Joe reinfuses. I don't know if you noticed that. This is the third time he's telling him, you're not a world beater. You're not going to be an MMA champion. You're not going to be the best. And when you're having these conversations, you have to continue to deliver that truth in a very delicate way, because there's going to be that push and pull. And here we go. Joe Rogan.
I like saying this,
doing
man.
it a third
I
time.
would chronic brain damage, chronic encephalepsy, or whatever they call it. I think I got some damage. I'm almost positive there's something in there that I have to control in a certain way. It's not affecting my speech.
So, just kind of looking at that, I kind of mentioned in the other clip, I'm going to play another clip where they're talking like a recap of that conversation. If you got to have people who are going to be honest with you. That was probably one of the most difficult things to tell a close friend in front of thousands and maybe millions of people. And but that was a great way in how you talk to someone that needs to hear the ugly truth. And sometimes those conversation guys don't necessarily need to be towards someone. Sometimes we need to be honest with ourselves and tell ourselves the ugly truth and be as factual and gentle with ourselves, but also open to it. But again, you need to get people like this in your life that are going to tell you, hey, you need to stop this behavior or else it's going to destroy you. Let's go into a recap where Joe talks about, this intervention in a more, after the matter of fact.
I'm so happy you're not fighting, and what we were saying was, I know that I was a dick to you to get you to stop doing it, but I felt like there was almost no other way that you were going to live. I felt scared. I've seen too many people that are just, there's a moment where it changes, where they stop being that person and they keep fighting. And you see it. You see the deterioration and no one steps in and no one stops them. And then you'll talk to them alone, man. Maybe you run into them in Vegas. Maybe you both have a couple of drinks and you see each other at the bar and you're like, hey, how's things? And you have these conversations and then the reality sets in. Things are not good for a lot of these guys. A lot of these guys that have taken punishment for too long, there's no bringing them back, man. They get to this spot where everyone knows there's something wrong and no one says anything to them. And I was real scared that was going to happen to you. I was real scared, Like I didn't anticipate when we did that crazy podcast that wound up being, this like intervention. I didn't even know I was going to do it. But while it was happening, I was like, you got to stop. That's all I was thinking is you got to get out. Because we were a little high.
Yeah.
I don't even remember if we were drinking, but we probably were. But I remember being so sensitive to it. Like there's something has to be done. Like now you had so many other possibilities that if most guys that are all in on fighting, they don't have anything on the side. Like there's almost nothing else there. No. There's almost just fighting and maybe a family, right? Mm-hmm. But you were starting to flourish. You're hilarious on podcasts. That can go away.
Yeah, and guys become shells, and man,
we see it, right?
Yeah. Dude.
Now that you're out, you see it, right?
Yeah. Thank God, or whoever's up there, man, for you and Brian Callen. Thank fucking God.
I know
man.
It came out dicky. I know it did, and I know I apologize then, and I apologize now.
But I think that's the only way you could do it.
I knew you weren't going to listen. I knew you had this pride, like you were like we were talking about before the show. You were a top 10 professional heavyweight in the biggest organization in the world. That's a identity thing too, man. Like you people get strapped into that identity.
One of the things that happens when and tell them something pretty devastating, as Joe did, is that it's going to come off like you're a total jerk, that you don't care, that you're selfish. How could you tell me something like that? But you got to have the courage to tell them if it's a conviction that's true and if there's mutual trust. I mean, Brandon, as he commented, he thanked Joe for being that honest, and that realization and that, thank goodness for you telling me this ugly truth is not going to happen immediately. You might even lose that friend for some weeks or some months while they figure it out. But I think, if you're coming from a good place, if you're coming from a place of objectivity and love and honesty, I think you owe it to your close friends to be honest. And if you can't be honest with that friendship, then you're probably not as close as you think you are, or vice versa. If your friends have not been honest with you and they're always agreeing with you, that's not a good friendship. You need to get new friends. I wanted to make this video because I think we live in an age where we're not honest with one another and we're not really connecting in a deep level, kind of more superficial, social media, just showing the good. Yeah, good job, positive, positive. But many times, some of the most important conversations we're going to have with our friendships and with ourselves are things that are not good. And we need to hear the ugly truth so we can do something about it and use that new perspective to have flourishing relationships, not only with other people, but with ourselves, or letting go of something that we're so tied to. And sometimes we hold on to that identity a little too long, and we need someone to tell us the ugly truth. Hey, you got to move on from that. You're no longer good enough to fight. Hey, you're too old to be out in the field. You're going to hurt yourself. Or, hey, it's time to retire. You're going to get yourself hurt. Your mind is not where it needs to be to do that kind of work. I want to share this video, guys. If you enjoyed the content, click like and subscribe. I really appreciate you guys showing up. And again, don't forget, people don't have ideas. Ideas have people.